Welcome to the episode of Reach Minds, Thoughts for Your Life's Journey. In today's episode, we will be exploring the important aspect of work-life balance, having a good mental framework, and what that means to us both in our personal lives and in the workplace. We're going to be exploring some tips and some ways that you can access and make working life for you much easier, much pleasurable, and something that you can integrate into your everyday practice. And of course, I'm having this conversation with the wonderful Leila Okaya, who is the founder of and the CEO of Diverse Minds UK Limited. Now, you probably have heard of Leila because she has done enormous amount of podcast. In fact, I was very inspired by her doing podcasts that I thought I'll have a go myself. Leila is a trained coach, mentor, speaker, mediator, and has a very thriving coaching practice, working with individuals and within organization, focusing on well-being, as well as other areas around equity and diversity. Leila was the head of the Centre of Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Centre at the Imperial College, London, from 2012 to 2017, before she flew the nest from working in an organisation and setting herself up in a private practice. I suspect Leila hasn't looked back since then. She's also a trustee of Serendipity, which I'd love to know, as well as at the Institute of Black Arts and Heritage and Pedestrian, a young people's arts organisation. Welcome, Leila.
Thank you, Nita, and thank you for your kind words. And I'm always honoured if what I do inspires other people, because I think there's so much space out there, and I think it's vital that women from all different walks of life and backgrounds, our voices are heard. So it's brilliant, and I'm really happy to be on today's show.
Lovely, lovely. I'm really looking forward to having this conversation. In fact, you've been on my list for a long time to come. So here we are. Let's dig in around work-life balance. And looking at it from in the modern age, in the contemporary age that we're all in now, how would you define work-life balance?
And I think it's such a brilliant question to kick off with, Nita, because work-life balance, of course, means different things to different people. And I think often we can think of it as 50% work, 50% life. But actually, for many people, they want to spend more time working, particularly if, like us, you have your own business, your own practice. You might be doing something very aligned with your values. It might be campaigning work. It's quite difficult to separate that from your identity and your values. So for some people, it might be that they want to spend 80% of their time on professional activities linked to their values and 20% downtime. Other people, maybe they want to spend 30% working, as it were, and maybe they've got a more traditional role, maybe they're in a manual role and it's hard work, and they want to ideally spend 70% with their family. Now, we know with everything going on and cost of living crisis, not crisis, it feels kind of manufactured, but cost of living challenges, I'm going to say, and lack of systemic improvements, that's incredibly difficult. So I think the first thing really for me about defining work-life balance is that as a model, it's can we think about when we feel optimum, doing what we can do and getting fulfillment out of that, and also having some downtime and recharge time. And then at an individual level, how that's going to look different for every person and what our scales are and how they might tip in different ways.
How do you think, looking at it from today's lenses, has the work-life balance has changed?
Yeah, and it really has changed. And I do think that lockdown and the pandemic has shifted that for many of us. I know for me, it's definitely pushed me into a direction where I want to spend more time on my personal side. So that percentage for me has gone up. I think maybe for others it has shifted in a different way. I think we also have to acknowledge, without ageism, but to look at the stages in our life, and our energy levels change. And biologically, of course, they will change depending on our life stage. So that has a really big impact to it. I think we're also all dealing with quite a lot. So we might have caring responsibilities for younger dependents, older dependents. We may be working 2 or 3 jobs. We may be trying to attain our goals and hitting barriers. So this is all going to impact that. So I think things have changed, and I think they've become much more difficult. We also, I think, positively work or live in a very global, connected ways in some respects due to communications and media. But in other ways, it's a challenge because we are living across continents and countries where we may not have access to our family and friends as readily as we would like. So that will also have an impact on our work-life balance. So those are the changes I've seen over the years. And also people wanting to step back and not being able to for financial reasons.
Yeah, I think everything that you say is certainly my own observation.
Mm,
And one of the other kind of recent thing that I think I've observed is, and you touched on it around the generational aspects of it. And I think people who are beyond late 50s, 60s, 70s want to continue to work.
mm,
I think I've certainly have seen that, and I'm a member of a website called I'm Not Done Yet. A very
mm,
funny person who set it up called Andrew Middleton, and he makes me laugh a lot. Because I think that the challenge around life balance has been you hit 60 or you hit
mm,
65, then you slow down. But I think it's changing. People are actually looking at maybe, okay, I can work 30%, but
mm,
I can relax 70%. And I still want a hand in that. So I think I've seen, and the second one you touched on again, which is about global working, I think that's added a pressure on
mm,
to
mm,
people because if you're working in the UK and your business partners on the West Coast, in the old days, it used to be India and here.
mm.
But of course, India had to stay up until 10 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
I'm not sure the West Coast is quite the same way. I think there is more pressure to be available. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's interesting that you mentioned India because this is an aside, really, but the India time difference of 4.5 hours always throws me. Anyway, that's an aside. It always throws me. But I think that, yes, I think particularly people who are in global multinational roles, I hear that a lot. And I remember doing some work for an organization that worked with lots of people in the film industry and the challenges they had. So when we were talking about work-life balance and managing their stress, they said, I can't manage my stress because I've got to be there and available for calls. Equally, if you're working with people in Japan and Australia, that's also a huge challenge in the UK if
Yes.
you're based in the UK. But I think so. I think really the point to that is why do we have to be available 24/7 in the sense that there are always alternatives and different ways of doing things. Now, of course, if you've got to go to meetings once or twice a month at a time zone that isn't great, perhaps people can do that depending on what else they've got going on. But I do think, again, this was really testament to this. You can't work from home, you can't work from home, you can't work from home. Okay, 2020, we're all working from home. Clearly, it can be done.
Mhm.
And I don't think we were designed, I don't think any animal or mammal is designed to be on 24/7.
Yeah.
So when I have questions or when I think about how could things be done differently, I will often think about, and I'm not that attuned with, I'm on a journey with it, but with nature and think, okay, so what happens in nature? Flowers don't generally bloom all year round. Animals, they're nocturnal, some animals are diurnal. It just depends. We're not meant to be on 24/7. It's actually not a natural state. So why are we trying to press the override button? Because eventually it will catch up with people in different ways.
That's a wonderful example. A couple of things you said there, Leila, which was around the flower doesn't bloom all year round. Even as a perennial, it has a wintering time where it goes, I need to rest. And then why should we override this? And I guess it depends on the work ethics around the US. We know it puts a lot of pressure on itself, although I think it's pulled back a little bit around you're allowed more than 2 weeks leave. But in the old days, you only were allowed 2 weeks leave. And we in the Europe European world were seen as lazy in comparison. And I don't think we're going back to overriding things. However, I do think there is the access of WhatsApp and other social media does make you think, oh, if an email arrives on my computer, and if I see a note that says I'm sending this email when it's the right time for me, doesn't mean you have to respond. And I think that's really good because people are being sensitive as opposed to really need the answer now, which I still think predominates in many organizational cultures. What's your thoughts on that?
Yes, I do agree with that. And I do think having a strapline on your email saying, I'm sending this at this time, but please don't feel pressure to respond is good.
Mm.
However, a couple of weeks ago, we were talking about this in a leadership program I was running, and the colleague said, I do have boundaries on my emails, but then they go straight to my WhatsApp. And the whole room was exploded, and you've got to shut that down. And she said, oh, they just ignore me. And they said, you need to turn off those channels on WhatsApp. So we had this long discussion, and I feel like it's very easy. I think one of the things actually we've seen partly driven by social media, and I do think it's important, is this word boundaries. Now, boundaries are really important, or limits, or there are other words for it, but I think it's much easier said than done. And when we get into habits, and remember, we also bring our own personal culture and journey into the workplace, whether it's conscious, subconscious, unconscious, and how we were treated in the home space, maybe with a fixer at home, that will likely, not always, but manifest or leak out into the workplace. So again, we have to observe, unlearn, maybe unlearn, relearn, do things differently, and it's not an overnight process. So I also appreciate it's very easy for me to say we shouldn't be on 24/7, but if that's the kind of culture around you, how do you then stop doing that when there are expectations? How do you push back? And you may not be able to find another job in an organization that suits you. But I think that it's about that there seems to be less and less mutual respect in the workplace, and who is entitled to put those boundaries in place and who isn't. And there seems to be quite a big gap around that. And I think that's very dangerous for work-life balance in a negative way.
It's interesting because you being on a leadership program, running a leadership program, sorry, does that get I mean, it sounds to me that it does get discussed, what you were just saying.
Yeah, so I have so it's a global majority leadership program, and we have a specific conversation around boundaries, what they look like, because of course, in collectivist cultures, we don't have the same idea as boundaries. And what the
Yes.
West calls, what the global North calls enmeshment, bad, it's not bad. It's a different way of being. It's a different context of socialization and connection. But unfortunately, it doesn't always serve us in the workplace very well because of the individualism. And I'm talking about the global North here, and
Yeah.
the individual and the low context culture of workplaces in the global North.
So, what do you think we, as individuals who work in organization, maybe need to start doing? Is it changing our own mindset?
Yeah, and I always talk about, I guess there's three levels. So there's the individual level, team level, organizational level.
Yeah.
So yeah, at the individual level, there's certain things we can do. So there are certain things we might want to think about. We can think about our communication styles. We can think about what are we willing to do. We can think about advocating for ourselves. But then the team level, our manager or supervisor or leader needs to be team leader, needs to be having conversations and managing upwards and saying, actually, this is the limit for my team. We can't take on anymore. And again, that's where often the roles that we play in the home zone can come in. And then at the leadership top level, those who set the tone for the organization. And I think leadership can be an interesting word in that context, but it's almost asking, why are we doing things like this? And what happened if we were to do things differently? And yes, it's scary, but let's look at some positive case studies where things have been done differently and actually the results have been even better. Again, sounds simple, but doesn't. It's like common sense isn't common practice often. And I think that there's a lot of struggle, and there's very much a sense of there's one way to do things. Example I'll give you is, and I don't know whether you had this, Nita, but when I was starting my business, I got told, oh, no, and I didn't want funding, but no one's going to fund, very dismissively, no one's going to fund a lifestyle business. I also got asked, oh, how's your little business? But interestingly enough, I was talking with a friend about Sigma Sports. So Sigma Sports, big organization, they help sell very high-end elite bikes. They showcase bikes that have been on Tour de France and elite races. And it turns out that Sigma Sport, interestingly, have made over the last 3, 4 years a loss of £10 million, but they're hailed as a good, solid business. So that's very interesting. Whereas businesses that like ours, we might turn over a small profit, but we're turning over a profit or a surplus. So again, it's this mindset, and it's also around who's seen as successful and this is how you do things. And yet often we're patronized and called little business, lifestyle business. And actually, what is wrong with that? Because if a quote unquote lifestyle business means we can have the 70/30, 50/50, 80/20 work-life balance we want, actually it's good for us and it's good for the economy and it's good role modeling for other people's well-being.
Yes. And I do think we need to think outside the box. I don't think enough organizations really are creative in the way that they have work-life balance. And I think that there is still a tendency, maybe leaders are around that as well, to simplify everything, to make everything reductionist. This is the hours and so forth. So I do think there are some changes. I don't know any amazing organizations that go, oh, yeah, we really practice work-life balance. People can decide how they want to work, and everybody's committed to doing that. I'm not aware of any. I don't know whether you are.
Yeah, the one organization that have done work-based actually that does come to mind through our conversation is Mind, the charity. So they do some brilliant things, and people can take duvet days for their mental health up to 5 days a year. A couple of organizations that do that. They also are very sensitive about global events and how they may be impacting staff. And I think that's really great. Again, I don't know because I don't have the detail about what goes on team levels, but generally, I think I know that they've done a lot of work on that to really practice what they preach.
If we were to talk about at the individual level, what kind of small changes do you think someone can make in a week for themselves to have greater work-life balance?
Yeah, and this is a really great question. So I would say there are a couple of quick things we can do. And I would say one of the first things is to look at what's going on for you in a week. And maybe this time of year is super busy because I know autumn, there's what I call the autumn onslaught, is to look at your week and think about how much time are you doing nice things for you and thinking about could I just insert half an hour, 30 minutes to do something nice for me? So it might be that you have caring responsibilities for younger dependents, you have to pick up your children from school. I'm not saying you drop that, but I'm saying maybe you go in the car, but could you maybe park a little bit further away and have a walk or take a different route, even if it's 15 minutes, and then have a nice different sort of route with your kids back and observe some of the nature? That could be something that you're still doing, but you're creating some time for you. The other thing I would say is to think about, and this isn't easy, I'm not saying this is a magic wand, but what you'd like to say no to, even if you imagine and visualize and say, I'd really love to tell that person no, or I'd really love to say no, and then think about realistically how you could work towards that. Maybe it's actually, I could do this. Why haven't I been doing this? Or maybe it's, okay, I don't really feel ready yet, but maybe I can tell someone this project is the priority. So your project, I can't focus on the data that you need yet. So one of the things I was told is you can say not yet if you don't feel like you can say no. And the other thing is to think about what is really draining your time emotionally. So there are things that we have to do, like cleaning. So for me, cleaning drains a lot of my time every week, but I've tried to have a cleaner. It doesn't really work for me, but at least I know that. For other people, it might be cleaning's really draining my time and I could have a cleaner. Why on earth am I not outsourcing it? It could be that actually I really love cooking, so I'm going to get some help on a Sunday afternoon, get someone to help me with my caring responsibilities, or actually just put everything else on the back burner. Maybe it's not caring responsibilities and spend 2 hours cooking so that I'm ready for the week. So I think it's again that realism. It's not toxic positivity ones. Those are some quick, I think, practical, hopefully, and realistic things that people could do.
I think you're right. I do believe there are lots of little things that we can do to help ourselves. I'm really astounded about the cleaner bit. My cleaner is saves me at least 6 hours a week that I would need to come and spend. I prioritize her over other things. I go, okay, I won't do this. I'll do that. And I think you can begin to make small changes My daughter does. My daughter, she works as a civil servant, and she, over the weekend, will prepare food for her lunch, will do a batch, and then so she doesn't want to spend too much money and at the same time have healthy food at the same time. So there are some things that we can actually do. So, in terms of, as the listeners, hopefully they're being inspired by what you're saying, is what's the kind of one thing do you think you hope that the listeners can take away and really put into practice for themselves?
Yeah, I think it's not always easy choices, but hopefully listeners will have some kind of choice and agency that they can enact. And it might be that you need some time to think about that, but that there will be possibility and there will be choice in there somewhere. It might not be straightforward, it might not be easy, but it will be there in some way.
I think that is so true. And I love the word they used, toxic positivity, because somehow people sort of say, if you do this, it becomes that. No, because it is about choices. It's about, where do I need to cut up? What's important for me in a week, in a month, to achieve itself? So I really like that word, that whatever it is, that we are at choice to some extent in where we want to focus on. And of course, organizations do also have responsibilities, and leaders in organizations still have responsibility. And we still need to be doing the asking as well. Negotiating, saying, I'd like to work 2 days from home and 3 days in the workplace, is a negotiation. Lovely. And in terms of sort of books, what would you recommend? I think the listeners will get resources sent to them on the sheet. So, what kind of books do you think you would highly recommend to others? And podcasts, in addition to yours?
Yeah, thanks, Nita. I think we were talking about Laura Vanderkam's website and her book around time. So it's about time management, how you can plan out your time. She's got quite a few books, but her book on time planning, how to use your time. And she's got a book around her new release is around find all the time. That's not the title, but the essence of it is find all the time you need by Tuesday, even when things thwart you and come in your way. I think also things like mindful mixes. I listen to audiobooks while I work because I find that really helpful. And that's not about multitasking. They're quite relaxing, not taxing audiobooks so that I just have something lovely in the background while I do work. So those things that are really useful. And as a result of the work that I do on work-life balance and mental well-being, I've got my own online course that has practical tips around how you can think about your own work-life balance and what you'd like to do.
These are going to be posted on the sheet so people can have access to it. I think what my takeaway has been from our conversation is I'll start with the last thing, which is around choice. We all have choices. I like the idea of sitting down and thinking about things, the little things. It's not the big things as well. And that having boundaries. If you're from the global majority, I do understand that from a collective culture, being more individualistic. And maybe from what you're saying is one of the strings is perhaps taking a step back and saying, what do I want? How do I create a work-life balance? I'm sure your beautiful example, I needed a cleaner, but actually the cleaner was making me more stressed. So it's where you prioritize. You're clear, aren't you?
And that's it. And then I'm not resentful, but I know that I need. So, yes, so that's really important. And then again, what I'll do is I'll try and do something nice in the background. So put on some good music or listen to an audiobook. And actually, then it feels I'm doing a chore, but it's quite pleasurable because I've got this other nice thing in the background. And of course, that's not for everyone. But like you said, that's a choice I've made that works for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And my final thing is I would highly recommend people to go on your work and life balance course, because I'm sure all the eloquent ways that you have shared your experience, your thoughts in this podcast would certainly lead me to think, oh, I want to sign up and see what there is available for me to access so that I can have better work-life balance. So thank you so much, Layla.
Thank you so much, Nita. It's been an honor to be on your show.
Lovely. Thank you. If you're interested in working with me, connect with me on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, or www.nitasharma.com. And if you enjoyed the podcast, why not consider subscribing on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you have access to your podcast, and leave a review.